Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly mind-bending, multi-perspective cosmic horror mystery. We are going to be looking at the recovered logs of the Acheron. This was a merchantman ship that essentially sailed right off the edges of our known reality. It's a mystery that challenges the very foundations of human perception. So grab a life vest and let's dive right in. Okay, before we get into the timeline of all this, I want you to just stop and consider a deeply unsettling possibility. What if a color was actually a doorway? I mean, imagine, just for a second, that merely perceiving a specific, impossible hue, a color entirely outside of our natural spectrum, could completely rewrite your biological and psychological reality. The simple act of seeing it could change what you are. I bring this up, right, because the guy who edited these recovered logs, Dr. Marcus Whetstone of the Royal Geographical Society, puts a huge warning right at the start. He notes that understanding the geometry presented in these pages is literally infectious. He explicitly says, do not read these pages in dim light, and if you begin to see a color that you cannot name, close this book immediately. So knowing that the ideas we're about to explore are presented as an actual cognitive contagion, I have to ask, are you absolutely sure you want to keep watching? Seriously, don't say I didn't warn you. All right, part one, the ghost ship discovery at Point Nemo. So to really get this, our timeline actually needs to start near the end of the story, in December 1847, when a whaling bark called the Demeter stumbled upon a perfectly intact, completely abandoned ghost ship. This ship, the Acheron, was found drifting 150 leagues from the nearest land. And this wasn't just some random stretch of ocean. The coordinates place it exactly at what is colloquially known as Point Nemo, the oceanic pole of inaccessibility. It is literally the absolute most isolated place on the surface of the Earth. To put that into perspective for you, if you're floating out there, you're physically closer to astronauts on the space station than to anyone else on Earth. Talk about a terrible place to get stranded. So first mate Samuel Lobed leads a boarding party, and they find the Acheron unnervingly pristine. The sails are furled, hull is totally sound, cargo is untouched. But here's where it gets bizarre. The entire vessel is slowly rotating exactly once every 7 minutes and 33 seconds, almost like it was caught in the memory of a vortex. The chronometer stopped dead at exactly 3:33 a.m., and covering every single surface was this opalescent shifting stain, kind of like mother of pearl. If the men touched it, it caused them to immediately start weeping, and it evaporated the second direct sunlight hit it. And that 23-man crew, just gone. Poof, without a single conventional trace. To figure out how it became this impossible ghost ship, we gotta rewind. Part 2, Descent into the Spiral. We're going back to September 1846, when Captain Elias Vance led a crew of outcasts and brilliant minds on a completely doomed expedition. Deep down in the ship's hold sat their cargo. It was this mysterious, ancient sphere, excavated from some subterranean chamber. It wasn't entirely solid, it wasn't liquid. But the craziest part is that it hummed. It vibrated at this inaudible frequency of exactly 0.73 hertz. And terrifyingly, that's a frequency that forces the human body to physically sync up with it. As they sailed, it began synchronizing their heartbeats and dilating their pupils. It was tuning them to something else. Eventually, the ship gets sucked into this titanic 5-mile-wide, rotating oceanic maelstrom. And as they fall into the spiral, the crew's reactions are just day and night. On one hand, you've got Captain Elias Vance. Pure, absolute terror. He actually gouged out his own eyes and took his life just to escape what he was seeing. But then on the other hand, there's first mate Silas Thorne. He experiences this profound aesthetic ecstasy. He wasn't scared at all. He was in awe. He voluntarily chose to just step right into the anomaly and dissolve his physical form into the light. So what exactly were they looking at? Well, at the dead center of this massive maelstrom was a wound in space, and it was emitting this synesthetic color that physically pressed against their minds. Captain Vance wrote in his final logs, "It is not any color that exists in nature. It is orthogonal to the spectrum, existing at right angles to all familiar hues." Just try to wrap your head around that. A color taking a 90-degree turn out of our reality. This impossible hue was the catalyst for an unthinkable biological change in everyone aboard. Which brings us to part 3, the anatomy of madness. See, the ship's surgeon, Dr. Eris Blackwood, he tried his best to maintain clinical objectivity through all of this. He documented the crew's horrifying transformation as if he were just writing up a medical case study for a university. Blackwood meticulously mapped out 3 distinct stages of this mutation. Stage 1 involved pupil dilation, seeing ultraviolet hues, and this intense euphoria. But by stage 2, things ramp up. The crew starts glowing with actual bioluminescence, developing geometric structures under their skin, and they stop talking completely, using nonverbal communication. Finally, stage 3, total conversion of human tissue into a crystalline matrix. The subject's identity completely shatters into a plural consciousness. Crew members like Willem Pike literally evolved into living, crystalline 4D entities that existed in multiple places at once. Absolutely insane. But the really crucial point here is that Blackwood eventually realizes this isn't a disease at all. As he himself was transforming, he noted, "We are becoming beings of pure information, patterns of light and geometry that can exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously." He got it. This was an extreme forced evolution. The crew was basically being rewritten to serve as a bridge, living translators for higher dimensional intelligences to cross over into our world. But the biology? That was only half the nightmare. Part 4. The fourth dimension mathematics. While the surgeon watched the bodies, the ship's navigator, Thomas Coffin, went full logic mode on the anomaly itself. Coffin calculates that this massive maelstrom isn't just some whirlpool. He figures out its logarithmic spiral constant is 0.577i, and that I stands for an imaginary number. This is a mathematical construct that literally should not exist in physical reality. Coffin realizes they are falling through a space that mathematically works on paper, but physically, in our universe, shouldn't be there at all. So Coffin deduces that this impossible color they're all seeing is just the human eye desperately trying to interpret the fourth spatial dimension. By encoding 4D space as a hue, their eyes were suddenly developing the capacity to perceive the ana and kata axes. Just like we have up and down or left and right, ana and kata represent the 2 directions moving perfectly perpendicular to our normal 3D reality. They were literally seeing physical direction as a color. And get this, those entities in the fourth dimension, they were trying to talk. Using a rig of prisms and mirrors, Coffin discovers the shifting colors were intentionally broadcasting universal mathematical constants. It wasn't random at all. On a macroscopic scale, the Fibonacci sequence. Mesoscopic, prime numbers. Microscopic, the golden ratio. It was a cosmic radio broadcast written in pure math. This basically proved these entities were highly intelligent geometric structures, speaking the one universal language of pure mathematics. All right, part 5, an infectious cosmic knowledge. Because honestly, the most terrifying part of this whole Acheron mystery isn't just what happened inside that maelstrom. It's the infectious fallout that followed its discovery. Let's track how this thing spreads. Step 1. That boarding party from the Demeter catches the contagion just by being on the Acheron and looking at those opalescent stains. They literally just walk off their own ship right into the ocean. Step 2. Captain Marsh of the Demeter figures out what's happening. He makes this massive, desperate sacrifice, burns the most dangerous journals, and takes his own life to stop the spread. But step 3. It just wasn't enough. The remaining logs acted like a Trojan horse, unleashing this cognitive contagion straight into the academic world back in London. You can actually track this knowledge virus across the decades. In 1847, the ship is found. 1849, Dr. Whetstone publishes the logs, and Oxford mathematician Charles Hinton starts experimenting with 4D sight and vanishes. By 1890, legendary author Robert Louis Stevenson reads them and starts having these vivid geometric dreams, and in 1926, H.P. Lovecraft finds the text in a restricted library which completely inspires his famous cosmic horror writings. These brilliant minds were all permanently altered just by interacting with the concepts. So here's the crucial point. The terrifying core thesis of this entire explainer is this: consciousness is geometry. The source material argues that simply comprehending these concepts, just visualizing this 4D math, physically rewrites your neural pathways. The understanding itself is the infection. Which leaves us with one final, unavoidable thought. We've just spent all this time looking at the numbers, the concepts, the whole structure of the maelstrom. So if understanding is infection, what exactly is happening to your mind right now? Have these ideas already invited the color of the maelstrom into your own consciousness? Thanks for joining me on this descent. I'll see you next time. Well, hopefully.